Hello, my name's Carl. We'll be looking at the Biodiversity the Habitats Directive. It should take approximately 5 minutes. We'll look at the Biodiversity the Habitats Directive, what it actually is, a case study of how it's implemented in an area, and any conclusions we can draw from it. The question we're looking at is, can a policy that's been put in place for positive effects on an area have any negative effects on an area? And I've used the Implementing EU Biodiversity Policy, a UK case study, the policy itself from the Centre for Social and Economic Research on Global Environments. The Habitat Directive, finalised in 1992, the directive states conservation of natural habitats, fauna and flora is an essential object of general interest pursued by the European community. Currently it's working in conjunction with the Wild Birds Directive of 2009, which was enabled to protect endangered birds, species and habitats. So it's a one policy for the entire EU. Obviously we've got a very, very rich tapestry of wildlife, bird species and habitats. It's a biodiversity conservation strategy based on regulations and protected areas. It's one of the most long-standing and commonly used precautionary measures for nature protection. However, it's not without criticism. A lot of criticism lies towards it being very, very costly and insufficient and inefficient throughout different areas of the EU. It operates a no net loss policy, which means any area that is protected under the Habitats Directive cannot suffer any negative impacts on that area and no damage. So the site has to be maintained and improved. If a project wants to take place in an area that is under the Habitat Directive, it has to go through damage and risk assessments to see if it can continue. The area we're looking at then, that the Habitats Directive is taking place or is implemented, is the Hickling Broads in Norfolk. It's a complex wetland system consisting of low-lying rivers, shallow lakes, broads, marshes and fens. It's essentially a national park, however not officially in name. It's utilised by a wide range of stakeholder groups, from recreation and amenity users, conservation interests, as I've mentioned, local residents living and working in the area, and massively used by people sailing and boating down the rivers. The Broads Authority that looks after it actually charges a levy to use it. The levy obviously produces revenue, and a lot of tourists come to that area to use the rivers. So here we see southeast England, Norwich here, further east, Great Yarmouth. This whole area then is the Norfolk Broads, and up here the case study Hickling. Again, you can see it's a large area, and there's a lot of rivers moving through this area. Impacts then. Historically, during the summer months, when nutrient loading has lowered, aquatic plants and weeds have inhibited people on the rivers from sailing and boating. And weed cutting was always an accepted management strategy. However, the cutting was seen to be damaging aquatic plants, thus detrimental to the ecosystem. What that means then, the English Statutory Nature Conservation Agency thought that this was in direct violation of the Habitats Directive, and because of the no net loss policy then, the Habitats Directive had to stop the cutting programme. So what happened? The impact on recreation and related socio-economic activities, sailing and boating, it was massively curtailed. Revenue was lost and tourism was impacted. However, under the Habitats Directive, impacts on recreation, related socio-economic activities and any visual impact is not thought to carry any legal weight under the Habitats Directive as it's currently interpreted within the UK. And I've highlighted interpreted because it is a policy and it's a framework, and it should be interpreted for different areas. So the outcomes: the cutting was greatly limited from 130 hectares proposed to 14.8. Boating activities massively curtailed, which annoyed a lot of people, as some of the stakeholder groups, as I mentioned. it was in direct violation of what they thought a negative impact on the area was. Revenue was lost and tourism was lost. And all the Broads Authority could do was to come up with a management plan of wait and see, essentially. Let's just see, well, let's quantify the socio-economic impacts of the curtailed sailing. And they knew very well that they needed to do something about the aquatic plants so that sailing and boating could take place, however their hands were tied. So the conclusion then, management of a dynamic and multiple use ecosystem is hindered if interpretation is static or rigid. So this is a framework policy implemented for the entire EU. However, each place has a different requirement, different stakeholder groups, and different user areas. So it has to be looked at sensibly. So whatever authority is being used under the Habitats Directive have to look at and interpret a negative impact of the no net loss policy. So the conservationists thought that this was having a negative impact on the area because they were cutting back weeds, which was affecting the ecosystem. However, for the people that were using the riverways to walk along it, or to boat, or to sail, obviously thought, well, that's actually having a negative impact, and we can't do that. So you need to use some kind of sensibility here and use it as a framework and a guidance rather than a cast iron. Every single site in the EU is exactly the same. To the future then, they're looking at experimental cutting and monitoring of areas. Again, wait and see, but this is costly and vague at best. So a policy put in place to produce positive effects can also produce negative effects if not interpreted and managed correctly. Thanks very much.